The hour of convening has arrived and the Senate will come to order. At this time, I'd like to ask that all unauthorized persons exit the chamber. It is my honor to recognize the often referred to Rock City's finest.
Mr. President, sometimes I'm referred to as being a rock head, but I appreciate the recognition of my district, and thank you for your leadership in this outstanding Senate body. Today, the senator from the 7th told me it's one of his favorite days. It's Marching Music Day, and he used to play the piccolo in the marching band down there in Ocilla. The journal's been read and found to be correct.
That was much abbreviated. Is there objection to the adoption of the journal? The chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is adopted. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. Mr. Secretary, first reading of Senate bills and resolutions, please.
Senate Bill 485 by Senator Robertson, the 29th, and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Title 40 and Article 7 of Chapter 8 of Title 42 of the OCGA relating to motor vehicles and traffic and ignition interlock devices respectfully so as to require the installation of ignition interlock devices. Senate Bill 487 by Senator Cowser to the 46th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to ethics in government so as to revise the provision relating to disclosure reports. Senate Bill 488 by Senator Martin of the 9th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Part 1 of Article 1 of Chapter 3 of Title 27 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to hunting so as to provide that any licensee 80 years of age or older.
Natural resources.
Senate Bill 489 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Part 2 of Article 1 of Chapter 8 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to lightning equipment of motor vehicles.
Transportation.
Senate Bill 490 by Senator Thompson of 14th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend an Act to provide a homestead exemption from certain city of Cartersville ad valorem taxes for educational purposes in the amount of $28,000.
State and local government.
Senate Bill 491 by Senator Parent of the 42nd and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 28 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding the General Assembly so as to provide certain procedures for redistricting of the General Assembly.
Reapportionment and redistricting.
Senate Bill 492 by Senator James of the 35th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Article 5 to Chapter 2 of Title 35 of the OCGA relating to the Motor Carrier Compliance Division so as to require training
Public
of law.
safety.
Senate Bill 493 by Senator Thompson the 14th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the OCGA relating to selling and other trade practices so as to provide for legislative findings, provide for standards of cybersecurity programs to protect businesses from liability.
Veterans, military, and homeland security.
Senate Bill 494 by Senator James of the 35th. A bill to be titled an Act to amend an Act to incorporate the city of South Fulton in Fulton County, Georgia, approved April 26, 2016, as amended, so as to eliminate the ability of the city council to remove...
State and local government.
Senate Bill 495 by Senator James of the 35th. A bill to be titled an Act to provide for a homestead exemption from the city of Union City ad valorem taxes for municipal purposes in the amount of $2,000.
State and local government.
Senate Resolution 885 by Senator Harper the 7th and others. A resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to authorize the state to incur general obligation debt in order to make loans or grants to certain counties.
Transportation.
Senate Resolution 889 by Senator Black of the 8th, a resolution recognizing Mr. Joseph Sonny Alexander Vickers and dedicating a bridge in his honor and for other purposes.
Transportation.
Senate Resolution 890 by Senator James of the 35th and others, a resolution creating the Senate Zero Waste Study Committee and for other purposes.
Rules.
Back, please, order, Mr. President.
Mr. Secretary, first reading and reference of House bills, please, and resolutions.
House Bill 755 by Senate Representative Belton of the 112th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Code Section 2068.1 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to charter school funding so as to provide that local boards of education shall provide local charter schools.
Education and youth.
House Bill 789 by Representative Newton of the 123rd and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Chapter 220C of the Title 33 of the OCGA relating to accurate provider directories so as to provide for the creation of a surprise bill rating
Health and
system.
Human Services.
House Bill 829 by Representative Stevens of the 164th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Code Section 4857 of the OCGA relating to assessment of tangible property so as to provide for a local referenda to authorize assessment.
Finance.
House Bill 830 by Representative Benton of the 31st. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Code Section 47-2087 of the OCGA relating to eligible large retirement systems authorized to invest in certain alternative investments.
Retirement.
House Bill 888 by Representative Hawkins of the 27th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance, so as to provide for certain consumer protections against surprise billing, to provide for short title, to provide for applicability. To
Health
provide
and Human Services.
House Bill 932 by Representative Gaines of the 117th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 7 of Title 14 and Chapter 35 of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to professional corporations and the Georgia Podiatry
Regulated
Practice.
Industries.
House Bill at 957 by Representative Jones of the 47th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 20 of the OCGA relating to education generally, so as to provide certain charter school employees shall be included in the health insurance fund for public school teachers.
Education and Youth.
House Bill 966 by Representative Burchett of the 167th, 76th, and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 12 of the OCGA relating to forest resources and other plant life, so as to regulate the harvest and sale of
Natural
palmetto.
Resources.
House Bill 988 by Representative Bentley of the 139th, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act to create a Board of Elections and Registration for Macon County and to provide for its powers
State
and
and
duties.
local government.
House Bill 1033 by Representative Earhart of the 36th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act creating the State Court of Cobb County, approved
State
March.
and local government.
House Bill 1042 by Representative Ralston of the 7th, a bill to be titled an act to authorize the governing authority of Fannin County to levy an excise tax pursuant to subsection B of Code Section 481351 of the OCGA, provide for procedures, conditions, and limitations, to provide for related
State and
matters.
local government.
House Bill 1043 by Representative Ralston of the 7th, a bill to be titled an act to amend an act providing for the election of the members of the Board of Education of Fannin County, approved April 9th, 1996, as amended, particularly by an act approved April 25th, 2002, so as to
State and
change.
local government.
House Bill 1051 by Representative Williams, 148th, a bill to be titled an act to provide a new charter for the town of Arabi to provide for incorporation, corporate boundaries, powers, and construction.
State and local government.
House Resolution 962 by Representative Stevens of the 164th. Resolution proposing amendment to the Constitution so as to authorize the General Assembly to provide by general law for local referenda to authorize assessment of residential homestead property owned
Finance.
by... Back, please. Order, Mr. President.
Secretary will now read reports of standing committees, please.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Banking and Financial Institutions has had under consideration the following legislation, instructing to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. House Bill 781, due passed by substitute. Senate Bill 462, due passed by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Ligon of the 3rd District Chair. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Ethics has under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Resolution 459, due passed by substitute. Senate Bill 463, due passed by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 397, due pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Kauser of the 46th District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Rules has had under consideration the following legislation and instructed me to report the same back to Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Resolution 193, due passed by substitute. Senate Resolution 194, due passed by substitute. Senate Resolution 328, due passed by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Mullis of the 33rd District Chair. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Rules has had under consideration the following legislation, instructing me to report the same back to Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Resolution 305, due pass. Senate Resolution 376, due pass. Senate Resolution 432, due pass. Senate Resolution 833, due pass. Senate Resolution 87, due pass by substitute. And Senate Resolution 263, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Mullis of the 33rd District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on SLOGO has under consideration the following legislation, instructing me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 406, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 240, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Anderson of the 24th District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Transportation Committee has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. House Bill 820, due pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Beach of the 21st District Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will now read bills and resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 102 by Senator Jones of the 10th and others. Unlocking the Promise Community Schools Act, an act. Senate Bill 224 by Senator Harper the 7th and others. Crimes and offenses, carrying of weapons in judicial courts by weapons carry license holders, provisions, revise. Senate Bill 311 by Senator Kirkpatrick the 32nd and others. Health, patient brokering, prohibit, definitions, exceptions, penalties, provide. Senate Bill 313 by Senator Burke of the 11th and others. Pharmacy benefits managers, regulation and licensure, extensive revisions, provide. Senate Bill 329 by Senator Roberts of the 29th and others. Motor Vehicle Title Loan Act, an act. Senate Bill 344 by Senator Mullis of the 53rd and others. Witness or criminal defendant, certain proceedings conducted by video conference, requirements provide. Senate Bill 391 by Senator Kirkpatrick the 32nd and others. Early prescription refills during Emergencies Act. Health insurers to provide coverage for early refills of a 30-day supply. Require an act. Senate Bill 410 by Senator Kennedy the 18th and others. Ad valorem tax appeals are alternative means of recovering costs of litigation attorneys' fees. Provide. Senate Bill 415 by Senator Gooch the 51st and others. Civil practice and litigation. Several titles of the OCGA. Amended and revised. Senate Bill 420 by Senator Jones the 10th and others. Department of Agriculture. Rules and regulations relating to public use of restroom facilities and food sales establishments. Establish. Senate Bill 431 by Senator Wilkinson the 50th and others. Annual performance evaluation, definition of on-time graduation rate. Provide. Senate Bill 439 by Senator Brasso the 28th and others. Juvenile Code, enhanced notice to and improved participation of foster, pre-adoptive, and relative caregivers in certain hearings. Provide. Senate Bill 442 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. Property, amendments to Property Owners Association instruments and covenants that restrict rental of residential lots and plots. Prohibit. Senate Bill 443 by Senator Stone of the 23rd and others. Garnishment proceedings, revise uniform procedures for garnishment actions. Provide. Senate Resolution 810 by Senator Mullis of the 53rd. School districts establish and maintain recycling programs. Urge. Senate Resolution 841 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others. Legislative acts void. People of the state may petition the judiciary for declaratory relief from certain acts of the state that violate the laws or constitution of the state or the Constitution of the United States. Provide. CA. House Resolution 1023 by Representative Welch of the 110th and others. Judiciary, people who may petition for declaratory relief from certain acts of the state or local governments or officers or employees. Provide. CA. That completes order, Mr. President.
All right, it's now time for our morning roll call. It is now time for a morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? The chair recognizes my good friend from Bremen. That's the senator from the 31st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Disregard.
You found your missing senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 48th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 48th is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 35th and the 55th.
Without objection, the senators from the 35th and 55th are excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 37th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 37th is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 20th.
Good morning, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 17th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 17th is excused. Are there any additional motions to excuse? The chair sees none. The secretary will call the roll of senators. Signify your presence by voting the yea switch. The secretary will unlock the machine. All right, it is now time for a morning devotional. It is now time for a morning devotional, and I'd like to ask that all senators please take your seats. In this chamber, we all cease all audible conversations. I'd like to also ask our doorkeepers to secure the chamber at this time. I'd like to recognize the senator from the 16th to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance and to introduce our chaplain of the day.
To the American flag we'll pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The state flag.
I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation.
Good morning, and I'm glad to be here this morning. Rainy day outside. That song, A Rainy Night in Georgia, seems to be playing all week long. But I'm excited this morning to be here and to present to you Dr. Joey Rogers and his wife Meg, who's with us as well. And I think you're going to really enjoy him. Joey is the senior pastor of, and his Dr. Joey Rogers. He's the pastor of First Baptist Church, Peachtree City, and has been there since September the 11th, 2011. He's a native Georgian. He graduated from Carson-Numa College and Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary. And he's served the Lord even in other countries, Norway and Germany. And someone even in my notes said Texas, but I didn't think Texas was another nation, but some people do think Texas is another nation. I will say this, one of the pleasures that I have had in serving is getting to meet the number of pastors around in my district. And what I find is this, we have people who serve our communities and reach out to our communities in ways no one else can. And he does that in his church and in our community in Peachtree City. And so I'd like to bring to you this morning Dr. Joey Rogers, and I guess that you would give him your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harbin, for the invitation, and thank you, Senators, for your service to our state. We are grateful for all that you do to lead our state and to help our state to be the best state in the United States. Amen? I've been in and around sports and playing, whether it was playing or coaching, for 48 of my 53 years. And over that time, I've become a big fan of coaches, whether it was Bobby Bowden or Dabo Sweeney, Mark Richt. But there's one coach in particular that I have come to appreciate. And it wasn't so much because of what he accomplished on the gridiron, but rather because of his character. Born in Mission, Texas in 1924, Thomas Wade Landry, without a doubt, left an indelible mark on this world. We know him as for his unmatched 29-year stint as the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. But that's what he did. Who he was far more important than his wins, his losses, far more important than Super Bowl titles. He was known as a quiet man of wisdom and unsurpassed integrity, generosity, humility, and determination. He was known to have said that my life is to keep my priorities straight as God first, family second, and then football. But what I admired most about Thomas Landry was early in his life, he realized that he was a nobody from nowhere who God wanted to make a somebody somewhere. And he never took this blessing for granted, but sought only to honor God in every way to everyone he came into contact with. In 1 Kings chapter 17, we find the story of another great man of God, who too was a nobody from nowhere, who God made a somebody somewhere. A man whose life changed a nation, taking it from a deplorable situation to turning its heart back towards God. And his name was Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba in Gilead. Talk about stepping out of nowhere into somewhere. Scholars said that Tishba has never been found. Apparently it was so far in the middle of nowhere, you had to go towards town to hunt. I'm not a hunter, but I'm sure that means something. When Elijah came into the scene, Israel as a nation was at its lowest moment. Some say it was the dark ages of Israel's history. It was a time in which the people of God had turned away and they began to follow the worship of Baal. And the result of that was the nation was plunged into depravity, gross immorality, and they had zero respect for life. At that time, Ahab had become king, and his wife Jezebel, a pagan queen from Assyria, they basically served as the Bonnie and Clyde of antiquity. Under Ahab, Israel plunged into its deepest despair, and during this time, they no longer could call on the name of Jehovah. In verse 1 of chapter 17, here's what it says. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word. Now, there's so much that could be said about that, and obviously I do not have time to do that. But I do want you to see this. When Elijah burst on the scene, seemingly from left field, God was raising up a man whose character, whose courage, whose conviction was so sound that he was willing to stand when no one else was willing to stand. And because of that, and because of great humility, God used him. I believe that as I have a calling on my life, each of you have a calling on your life. And that calling is going to require conviction and courage and great humility. And so I want to encourage you today. I think it's critical we never get too big for our britches. We never believe our press clippings, because the truth is we're all just a bunch of nobodies from nowhere that God wants to make a somebody somewhere. I believe when it's all said and done, whether you come from Ackworth or Valdosta, Buckhead or Sonoya, whether you have degrees from Harvard, Stanford, Tech, Georgia, or the School of Hard Knocks, we can never forget that we're just a bunch of nobodies from nowhere who God wants to make a somebody somewhere. A couple of weeks ago, my wife and I have 4 children. I wish I had time to tell you about all 4 of them, but our youngest is 13. He's 6'1 and a half, weighs 170 pounds, and wears a size 13 shoe. Can throw an 80-mile-an-hour fastball. I'm counting on him as my retirement. But I came home from work the other day, and my wife looks over to me, and I'm sure none of you men have ever had this happen, but my wife said, "You need to go talk to your son." So I was like, okay, what did my son do? So as I'm walking back, she said, I told him to take out the trash, clean up his room, and walk the dog. Has he done that yet? I walk into his room. He's laying on his bed playing PlayStation 4. I said, son, what are you doing? And he gave me the look of, what does it look like I'm doing, dummy? And I said, son, does your mother not say you need to take out the trash, walk the dog, clean your room? And he had this blank stare. He had no idea what I was talking about. So I said, son, stand up. So he stands up, and as a good dad would do, I begin to discipline him. And I'm going up one side, down the other, telling him all the things that he should be doing. And all of a sudden, he gets this big grin on his face. And I go, what are you smiling about? He goes, you got to look up to me to discipline me. Now, my son's awesome. He was just being funny. But in that moment, I said, son, you might be bigger than me, but I've got old man strength, and I can take you out. Well, a couple of days later, we were goofing off, and I was in his bedroom, and he came from behind and grabbed me. I think he was ready to test his manhood. And when he grabbed me, I turned around. I happened to be a state champion wrestler. Before he knew what happened, I had him above my head, his arm between his legs, and I tossed him onto his bed about 3 or 4 feet, and he had this look on his face like, oh, no, we're not there yet. Point being, he was getting a little too big for his britches. Men and women, we cannot serve others if we think too highly of ourselves. So may I encourage you, as I encourage myself, as I encourage my son, as I encourage my church, let's be people of humility who serve our God with honor, always remembering that we're a bunch of nobodies from nowhere who God can make someone somewhere for his glory. Amen? Let's pray. Father, thank you for the time we've had this morning. I thank you for these men and women and for the remarkable privilege and the great responsibility they have for our state. Lord, I ask that you would bless them today. I ask that you would give them wisdom. I ask, Father, that you would help them to look beyond their constituents, that they would look beyond their personal preferences, that, Father, they would look to what's best for the state of Georgia, and that, Lord, that the steps and the decisions they make would not just be honoring to our citizens, but honoring to you. And we thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.
He's a baseball player.
Yeah, I played Are there any unanimous consents? The chair sees none. We've got a number of special presentations today, and I would like to introduce our first. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution?
Senate Resolution 863 by Senator Heath of the 31st and others. A resolution recognizing Civil Air Patrol for their service to the citizens of Georgia and for other purposes. Whereas the Civil Air Patrol was founded on December 1st, 1941, as an organization of volunteers meant to assist the United States military and natural defense by performing aerial coastal patrols and emergency services within the continental United States. Whereas Civil Air Patrol and ground teams perform over 90% of inland search and rescue missions tasked by the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center with its 60,000 volunteers and 560 aircrafts. Whereas the Georgia Wing of the Civil Air Patrol consists of nearly 1,900 volunteer members in 43 squadrons and 6 groups located throughout this state. And whereas the esteemed value of the Georgia Wing members' volunteer hours in 2019 was almost $5.8 million, and whereas these flying Minutemen of the Civil Air Patrol have, since its inception, consistently provided this state with invaluable emergency services, aerospace education, and cadet programs. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize the selfless contributions that the volunteers of the Civil Air Patrol have made to the state of Georgia. That completes order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 31st to speak to our special guests.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I speak and forget about it, we also have some members of the Civil Air Patrol in the gallery. If you all would stand so that we could recognize you as well. Thank y'all for your service. The Civil Air Patrol was founded on December the 1st, 1941 as an organization of volunteers meant to assist the United States military in national defense by performing aerial, coastal patrols and emergency services within the continental United States. The Civil Air Patrol is assigned 3 distinct missions: emergency services, aerospace education, and cadet programs. The Civil Air Patrol air and ground teams perform over 90% of the inland search and rescue missions tasked by the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center with its 60,000 volunteers and 560 aircraft. The Georgia Wing of the Civil Air Patrol consists of nearly 1,900 volunteer members in 43 squadrons and 6 groups located throughout the state. The Georgia Wing's squadrons have been awarded the National Squadron of Distinction in 2008 and 2009, and the Southeast Region Squadron of Distinction in 2010. The Civil Air Patrol heavily supported hurricane relief efforts for Dorian and Michael by assisting FEMA, photographing damage and providing thousands of activated distress beacons and conducting sundown patrols in South Georgia. The estimated value of Georgia Wing's members' volunteer hours in 2019 alone was almost $5.8 million. So with that, I would like to recognize them to address us for just a moment and for you to show your appreciation for them.
Mr. President, members, it is truly humbling and an honor for me to stand before you today to address you on behalf of the 1,900 members of Georgia Wing Civil Air Patrol. I could stand up here and tell you about the fantastic numbers, the flying hours, the missions, the training that we conduct, all as servant volunteers to the state of Georgia and to our country, but that's not what I want to talk to you about today. What I want to talk to you about are these 4 young men and women that I brought up front. This is what Civil Air Patrol is all about. This is what your support gives us. We're facing a national crisis. We're short in aviation. We're short in science, technology, engineering, and math specialists. I just got back from Washington, D.C., where the Adjutant General from West Virginia told us that today, 75% of our youth are not eligible to serve in the military for a number of reasons. That means the National Guard as well. Civil Air Patrol can have a massive impact on those numbers. And that's why we're here serving Georgia serving you, and we greatly appreciate the support you continue to give us. It makes a difference to the state, but most importantly, it makes a difference to the youth. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce our doctor of the day, and I'd like to recognize the senator from the 42nd to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor to introduce our doctor of the day. I've been on a roll, so I'm excited to have another fine MD from my district visiting us and serving us today. This is Dr. Jeffrey Linzer. He attended medical school at the California College of Medicine at the University of California at Irvine, where he also completed his residency in pediatrics. His fellowship in pediatric emergency medicine was completed at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Dr. Linzer is an attending physician at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and a professor of pediatrics and emergency medicine at Emory University. Please join me in welcoming and thanking Dr. Jeffrey Linzer.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and august members of this body. I want to thank you for your service to the people of Georgia. I know that representative government is hard and compromise is the key to success. I think it was best summed up by Edmund Burke, who said, "Your representative owes you not his industry only, but his judgment, and he betrays instead of his serving you if he sacrifices to your opinion." We are very busy in the emergency centers of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, seeing almost 200,000 children a year. Unfortunately, many of these visits are due to the lack of primary care and mental health resources. Mental health in pediatrics has become a greater issue, and I have seen children as young as 6 years of age in with a suicide attempt. Pediatric mental health is problematic. We can wait many days awaiting placement in an appropriate facility because of the lack of adequate facilities. Part of the issue with the lack of primary care resources can be traced, unfortunately, in part to Georgia Medicaid. In our great state, over 50% of Medicaid recipients are children, but less than 20% of the Medicaid dollars goes to their care. It seems at times we value our grandparents more than our children, since Medicare reimbursement is higher than our state's Medicaid in many instances. I know you all want to do what is best for our children, and I hope that you will continue to look for ways to help improve the care of this very fragile group. I want to again thank you for your service to our state. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution for our next special guests?
Senate Resolution 681 by Senator Williams of the 39th and others. A resolution recognizing and commending Thomas and Tanya Clem and the Metro Atlanta Chess Partners Incorporated for their contributions to the Metro Atlanta community and for other purposes. Whereas Thomas and Tanya Clem established the Metro Atlanta Chess Partners in 2015 after recognizing that minority children in the west side of Atlanta have been underserved in participating in national tournaments through U.S. chess. And whereas Metro Atlanta Chess Partners intends to bridge the educational gap through the principles of chess. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Thomas and Tanya Clem and the Metro Atlanta Chess Partners and extend the most sincere best wishes for continued prosperity, happiness, and service to the city of Atlanta, the state, and the nation. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call upon the senator from the 39th to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my privilege to recognize Mr. Thomas and Tanya Clem and the Metro Atlanta Chess Partners for their contributions to the Atlanta community. Several years ago, Tanya and Thomas Clem recognized that minority students were underserved and underrepresented in national tournaments throughout the U.S. chess teams, and they made it their mission to provide mentoring and funding for students to practice and compete. Since their founding, Metro Atlanta Chess Partners has purchased membership for 179 students, hosted 22 rated tournaments, and had a total of 219 participants take place in U.S. chess rated tournaments and 8 participants in the 2018 Atlanta Junior High Nationals. And as a parent of my little Carter Cakes, who's a participant in the program, I've seen firsthand how wonderful their work is. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to recognize them here today. And now I'm going to bring up Mr. Thomas Clem for brief remarks.
Good morning. I'd like to say thank you, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Dunkins, members of the Senate. I also like to say thank you to my beautiful wife for supporting me in this endeavor. I have 2 gentlemen behind me, Coach William Fulton Wink and Coach Tim Newton. And they're not chess coaches, they're tennis coaches who allowed us to come in their space to help develop their children for a day like today. So without their support, I don't know if this ever would have gotten started. What started as an activity now has a biggest purpose. So thank you guys again. I appreciate you all for welcoming us in your space. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for coming. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution for our next special guests?
Senate Resolution 710 by Senator Davenport and the 44th and others. A resolution congratulating the Cedar Grove Saints for winning the 2019 JHSA Class 3A State Football Championship and for other purposes. Whereas the Cedar Grove Saints have established and maintained a proud tradition of excellence with equal emphases on character and academics. And whereas the superlative team has completed another triumphant season of football competition. And whereas excellent play, superior teamwork, and extraordinary resilience made this team a spectacular one to observe throughout this season. And as a fitting finale to its remarkable 2019 campaign, the team captured its 3rd state football championship title in 4 years. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body congratulate the Cedar Grove Saints for winning the 2019 GHSA Class 3A State Football Championship and extend their best wishes for their continued success. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there any objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Chair would like to call upon the senator from the 44th to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, we have some champions in the Georgia State Senate today. The All-Star football team from Cedar Grove High School in DeKalb County. Cedar Grove Saints football team is here this morning. They are being recognized for winning the 2019 GHSA Class 3A State Football Championship. I like this football team, and one of the reasons is that the team has established and maintained a proud tradition of excellence with equal emphasis on character and academics. Character matters, and academics matter. They have excellent play, superior teamwork, and extraordinary resilience made this team a spectacular one to observe throughout the season and as a fitting finale to its remarkable 2019 campaign. The team captured its 3rd state football championship title in 4 years. And I am so happy to have them here today. And on the platform with me is the principal of the school, Mr. Clifton Spears. Please raise your hand. Head coach Miguel Patrick, LaTrevulon Blackamore, Mr. Shavon Wright, and Mr. Brandon Hall. You know, it takes great leadership to lead a team, and it takes teamwork to have a championship. So with the team from Cedar Grove High School, the Cedar Grove Saints football team, please stand. Thank you. With great character, good character, and good academics, you all will go far in life. Just remember to keep doing what you're doing and treat everybody right and do the right thing in life. I'm going to ask Mr. Patrick, the head coach, to please come and make some remarks.
On behalf of Cedar Grove and our principal, Mr. Spears, we would just like to thank you guys for having us here today. It's a prestigious honor for us to be here, and we just appreciate the award and for you guys recognizing us today. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution for our next special guests?
Senate Resolution 738 by Senator Unterman of the 45th. A resolution recognizing and commending Barry Sanders on his outstanding service in health care and for other purposes. Whereas Barry Sanders has long been recognized by the citizens of this state for the vital role that he has played in leadership and his deep personal commitment to the welfare of the citizens of Georgia. And whereas he has over 15 years of healthcare experience in both Fortune 500 world and running his own companies, and whereas his latest venture, Complete Care Medical, is the latest independent hospice equipment provider in the state of Georgia and is recognized as a nationwide industry leader with numerous awards. And whereas Mr. Sanders serves in numerous roles in his community, including on the board of directors of the Home of Hope at the Gwinnett Children's Shelter, as director of Gwinnett County Bring Up Grades program, and as president of the local North Gwinnett Kiwanis Club. And whereas Mr. Sanders has served with honor and distinction with the healthcare industry, and his vision and unyielding commitment have set the standard for service in the industry. And now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Barry Sanders for his efficient, effective, unselfish, and dedicated service to the state of Georgia, and extend the most sincere best wishes, continued health, and happiness. That completes order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Chair would like to call upon the senator from the 45th to introduce our very special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, good morning. It's a great day in Georgia, and it's especially a great day when we have our constituents down to the state capitol. And if you notice, there is someone named Barry Sanders up here with us on the dais. And I had someone ask me, Senator, is that the Barry Sanders? And I said, well, of course it's the Barry Sanders from North Gwinnett, Georgia. Of course it is. So it's an honor to be able to have Mr. Sanders and his family here. We have with him his wife, Heidi Sanders, his kids, Chris Pickens. He attends Osborne Middle School. William Sanders, who attends Buford Senior Academy. Mitch Pickens, Duncan Creek Elementary, and unfortunately his daughter, Emma Sanders from Buford High School, who was just named Miss Buford, I believe. Miss Buford could not be here because Miss Buford could not miss school. If every community had a Barry Sanders, we would not have to sit here and write new laws and appropriate money, because Barry is committed to the community in Gwinnett County. He is the safety net that helps all people in our area. And whenever the food shelter's low, we start getting emails and photos. Come bring some food. We need some dry goods. We need peanut butter. We need this. We need that. There's people in dire needs. Whenever the kids at the children's shelter, especially at Christmas, need anything, absolutely anything, either them or their mothers, Barry Sanders is the one that answers the call. And it's not just in Gwinnett County. He also helps children all over the state of Georgia through nonprofit organizations. And he does all this while running a very successful healthcare company. So it's my honor to be able to have the Sanders family here and to honor them with this resolution. I hope you will give them a warm welcome, and thank you for listening. Mr. Sanders.
Members of the Senate, Lieutenant Governor, I want to thank Senator Unterman. I'm very humbled and honored with this, and I want to thank her because every time we've had an event for our raising donations for the foster kids in Gwinnett County, and there's 635 of those. Whenever we've had a call or whenever the distress call is calling out for the kids at the Children's Shelter, Gwinnett Children's Shelter, Home of Hope, or the North Gwinnett Co-op, Senator Unterman has been championing and has said whatever I need or whatever resources we need. And I'm truly blessed to be surrounded by great people that want to make a difference in their communities. And I'm sure in all 55 state Senate districts, there are good folks that want to make a difference and want to make an impact every day. And I'm truly blessed to fill that role in the 45th. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. Good for you because you're tough. You're tough. Hold on, I'm going to take. You ready? Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution for our next special guests?
Senate Resolution 652 by Senator Gooch, the 51st, and others. A resolution designating September as Veteran Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month in Georgia, designating Pantone 395 as official color associated with veteran suicide and prevention activities in Georgia and for other purposes. Whereas 17 veterans commit suicide every day in the United States, equating to a rate of suicide among male and female veterans that is 1.3 and 2.2 times higher than the norm, respectively. And whereas United States citizens owe all veterans who have sacrificed their comfort, security, and happiness to ensure our most basic freedoms an eternal debt of gratitude. And whereas it is essential that all veterans receive the assistance they need to enhance their well-being and their ability to live long and fulfilling lives. And whereas communities, peers, close associates, and the media are critical in preventing death by suicide. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body designate September as Veteran Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month and Pantone 395 as official color associated with veteran suicide prevention activities in Georgia. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call upon the senator to my immediate side from the 51st to introduce our special guests.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, it's a great pleasure to have some distinguished guests in the Senate today. Who you see behind me are the people who protect our freedoms every day. These are veterans of our U.S. Armed Forces, members of the Army Ranger Association, the Mountain Association, which I'm proud to call home in Dahlonega. We're home to the 5th Ranger Training Battalion. We also have our senators up here who are also veterans. Of course, the majority leader who is also a Ranger. Today we recognize our guest in honor of Suicide Awareness Month. This resolution designates September as Suicide Awareness Month in Georgia. In 2017, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs shows that 6,139 veterans took their own lives. 7.9% of adult people in the U.S. are veterans. 17 veterans commit suicide every day. The average number of veteran suicide deaths per day has equaled or exceeded 16 since 2007, and more than one veteran suicide occurs every 2 days here in Georgia. United States citizens owe all veterans who have sacrificed their comfort, security, and happiness to ensure our most basic freedoms an eternal debt of gratitude. Designating September as Veteran Suicide Awareness Month through this resolution will continue to honor those who have served and sacrificed all. This resolution also designates the color Pantone 395 as the official color associated with veteran suicide and prevention activities in Georgia. It's my honor to bring forth a spokesperson for this group, and I want you to give a warm Senate welcome to Mr. Bob Williams.
Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Senators, thank you, Senator Gooch, for bringing forward this resolution and having us here today. My name is Bob Williams, and I had the honor of serving for around 7 years, 1st and the 2nd Ranger Battalion in Fort Lewis, Washington, and then as a Ranger instructor at the Mountain Ranger Camp in Dahlonega, Georgia, throughout the 80s. All the men standing here with me today are former Ranger instructors. They represent from the Vietnam era all the way through the modern war on terror. We are dedicated to supporting former and current Rangers wherever they may be. We also support the blinded veterans, and also we are currently reaching out to veterans from all branches, in effect to reduce the number of suicides among our ranks. 22 or 16, whatever the number you choose to go with, is unacceptable. And that number doesn't even include those that are suicides that are reported as accidents, such as vehicular accidents and things of that nature. Our goal is to raise awareness of suicide prevention, not only with the declaration of September as Veteran Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, but also to associate the color Pantone 395 with that. And that, by the way, is what we know as safety green. Much like the pink is associated with breast cancer, we want to associate this color with the suicide prevention and awareness all across the nation. It's already been passed in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, or New Jersey rather, and they're working on it in Ohio. Now you may think safety green is a strange color to have as our official color, because all the road workers, all the construction workers everywhere have this color on. But the interesting thing is what we want to happen is when you see that road worker and you see that safety green color, you think to yourself, there's a veteran on my street that could probably use some help. Or you think to yourself, there's a veteran in our community who maybe just needs somebody to talk to. There's a veteran somewhere in our church that needs a whatever. There's veterans everywhere, and we see that color. We want people to think of the veterans in their area that they can give a handout to, or a helping hand to, rather. We also are conducting outreach programs to assist with veterans' transition from military life to civilian life. Most don't realize that what is considered normal in military life isn't the same thing as what's considered normal in a civilian world. So these soldiers coming back after long tours of duty, whether it be overseas or wherever they may be in the military, they're going into places of work and having problems and conflicts because what they see as normal, the rest of the world doesn't see as normal. So all of a sudden, something is not a life and death situation, and that veteran's having a hard time dealing with that, understanding that, and it's causing conflicts in the community. That then causes conflicts at home, and it goes on from there. We also work with PTSD, TBI are also major concerns of ours. The U.S. Mountain Ranger Association will be hosting a program, a Veterans Retreat in Blairsville starting March 29th for a week, and hopes to spread this type of training across the state. The resolution will go a long way in helping us help other veterans. Rangers lead the way.
Thanks for your service. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution for our next special guests?
Senate Resolution Number 888 by Senator Watson and the First and others. A resolution recognizing and commending the members of the Savannah St. Patrick's Day Parade Committee, General Chairman Lawrence E. Edgerly, and the Grand Marshal of the 2020 St. Patrick's Day Parade, Michael Rausch Sr., on the upcoming occasion of the 2020 St. Patrick's Day Parade in Savannah, Georgia, and for other purposes. That completes order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I have a special place in my heart for St. Patrick's Day. It's because it's my wife's birthday. So we celebrate her birthday more so than we do St. Patty's Day. But it's my honor to recognize a senator from the 1st to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's certainly my honor to introduce you to the Grand Marshal of St. Patrick's Day Parade, Michael Wayne Roush. He was born in 1944 in Ohio, but he moved to Savannah in 1957 and got his education here in Savannah, the Sacred Heart School, Bennett Military School, and then later at Armstrong State College in Savannah in 1971. He married a local girl and has been there ever since. Michael loves spending time with his children and his many grandchildren that he has, boating, fishing, as we almost all do in Savannah and on the coast. Michael started a business in 1973 that is now family-owned and owned by his son to a second generation. It is my great honor to introduce you to the Grand Marshal Michael Wayne Roush of 2020 St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Watson. It is my pleasure and honor. I'm humbled to be here. I would like all of you to please come to Savannah, Georgia, March 17 and that weekend, and enjoy the celebration and the Feast of St. Patrick with all of us. Thank you very much. Have a good day. How's that?
We are on a roll. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution for our next special guests?
Senate Resolution 651 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others. A resolution congratulating and commending Georgia Association of Realtors and for other purposes. Whereas Georgia Association of Realtors will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of its founding. And whereas the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Georgia Association of Realtors is a celebration of the legacy created and cultivated by dedicated real estate professionals over the past century. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body congratulate Georgia Association of Realtors on celebrating its 100th anniversary, commend it for its many outstanding contributions on behalf of the citizens of Georgia, and extend best wishes for continued growth, development, and success. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call upon the senator from the 51st to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. My realtor friends behind me are trying to sell the president a home in Pine Mountain, but I think he's going to stay in Forsyth County. He wants to be in North Georgia, is that right? It's an honor to be here to present these fine folks in the gallery today, and if you would, if you're a part of the Realtors Association, please raise your hand. There's a couple hundred in the building. They're wearing the blue scarves. 700 in the building. How about that? Y'all give them a warm welcome to the Senate chamber. I'll go over some real quick notes and we'll move on. On January 10th, 1920, the Georgia Association of Realtors received its sixth charter from the National Association of Realtors. The Georgia Association of Realtors has served the citizens of the state of Georgia by advocating on behalf of private property rights for a century. Members of the Georgia Association of Realtors also have the dream of home ownership, a reality for millions of Georgia residents. The Georgia Association of Realtors seeks to increase knowledge of all real estate professionals in Georgia by offering scholarships for continuing education classes through its Scholarship Foundation, which was established in 1984. The Georgia Association of Realtors raises the bar of professionalism in Georgia real estate by providing to all members standard contract forms that are continuously vetted for accuracy and relevancy. The members of this body congratulates the Georgia Association of Realtors on celebrating its 100th anniversary, commend it for its many outstanding contributions on behalf of the citizens of Georgia, and extend best wishes for its continued growth, development, and success. Please welcome the Georgia Realtors to the state capitol today. Who would like to speak? Are you the chairman? And now we'd like to ask President Farron King to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Senator Gooch, Lieutenant Governor Duncan, esteemed members of the Senate. We're proud to be here with you today representing the 42,000 plus Georgia Realtors who have been protecting private property rights and the American dream of home ownership. I'd like to recognize the folks that are with me today, our Vice President of Governmental Affairs, Lisa Scully, our President-elect, Dory Love, our CEO, Deb Junkin, and our Chair of State and Local Government Affairs Committee, Kathy Haddock. Could I ask any Georgia Realtors that are with us in the gallery to please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? The chair recognizes the minority leader. I would ask for this chamber's utmost attention as the minority leader has a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I rise before you with a very sad news, and I wanted you to be aware you don't see the senator from the 35th here today. Earlier today, she heard that her sister had passed, and we all know how important our family is. Talking to the majority leader a minute ago, we both extend our deepest sympathies. We know each of you feel the same way, and I would like us to have a moment of silence for her and her family.
The minority leader has asked that we rise to our feet and offer a moment of silence.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, keep her in your heart, and please say a prayer for the family. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to talk about civics for a moment, and I hope the video audience is paying attention. If a bill is in the House of Representatives, that means it is not in the Senate. And we cannot move a bill that is in the House of Representatives in the Senate until it passes over to the Senate. So please understand, if a bill is not in the Senate, there's nothing we can do about it. We cannot move it if it's in the House. Your work is to call your House member and ask them to advocate for that bill in the House. Mr. President, that is all.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, 2 days and 161 years ago, March 2nd, 1959, Pierce and John Butler claimed a fortune of approximately $700,000, which would make them roughly $2 million today. How they claimed that fortune, you ask? Well, let me tell you. The Butler brothers would go on to coordinate one of the most somber moments in American history. On a rainy day, on a horse racing track located in present-day Savannah, 436 slaves would be brought to this horsing stables, and 436 slaves would be sold over a two-day period. This would be labeled as the Great Slave Auction by News, and the weeping times by these Africans and those that were enslaved at the time. It would be considered the weeping times by African Americans today and many others due to reported sounds of loud cries from the enslaved people who were to be sold that day, corresponding with the rain. They say that the heavens opened up and rain came down. That lasted from the moment the first slave was sold to the last slave that left at auction. Today, we consider that terrifying moment of Georgia's history that we all must remember to ensure that this will never happen again, that we as a people must continue to progress. We as a state must continue to progress. We as a nation must continue to progress. We have us with today Mr. D'Angelo Hansen and his coalition that would recognize this somber occasion in Savannah, Georgia, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of this week, to recognize what happened to enslaved people, what happened in American history, but more importantly, this moment in history to recognize what happened to enslaved people in this somber time. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 34th for a point of personal privilege.
Trying to catch my breath. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I rise to talk to you all a little bit about this very important subject matter, and that's maternal mortality. As a grandmother, I know the birth success very well. In fact, I'm disheartened at the maternal death rate because the burdens of mothers' deaths falls onto their immediate family, such as grandparents. Now, you all know I bring my grandkids down here, I talk about my grandkids, and grandkids are very important. But more importantly, their parents need to be here to raise them. And the grandparents can give them back whenever they want to. We want to keep maternal mortality at its lowest. Georgia Department of Public Health just released the newest data last week that says Black women die 2/3 more than any other group of mothers. Our state has already created a maternal mortality review committee, which is made up of abstractors and state workers to determine the reason for the women's death. The House convened a study committee this session during the interim, and the first recommendation of 19 recommendations is to expand Medicaid for postpartum, expanding what most people know us as pregnancy Medicaid to cover women after birth for a total period of 1 year as opposed to the current 2 months is the best way for our state to address this crisis. So I am just reminding you all that we got 2/3 of Black women who look like me dying from birth, just giving birth. And now we know parts of the problem. When we know better, Georgia, we should do better. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the pro tem for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. It gives me great honor and distinction to come here before you today because I have a man and a family with me, actually, a gentleman and his beautiful bride here with me today that have had an enormous impact on their community and on the state of Georgia and on our economy and in law enforcement and quality of life in philanthropy, in charitable giving, and involvement in their community. I have with me a gentleman by the name of Alan Vigil and his beautiful bride, Bonnie. Bonnie, would you stand in the gallery? Stand in the gallery. Give her a round of applause. Now, Bonnie has on a blue dress, but she's not with the realtors. but she is a woman of stature and distinction and honor, and the way she has lived her life. My wife, Teresa, and I have watched Alan and Bonnie and the way they've raised their family and the way they've been devoted to their community and the way they've been devoted to their children and their grandchildren. And Teresa and I have used them as mentors and models. I know that everybody in this room thinks I'm the nicest guy in the car business. I'm actually number 2. The nicest guy in the car business is Alan Vigil. Alan Vigil has a story that is amazing. His parents were from Spain. They came to the U.S. One grandfather was a cigar roller. The other grandfather took correspondence courses from University of Florida and became a pharmacist. His dad, there's some confusion about whether he was born in Tampa, Florida, or Cuba. There's some confusion about that, but they are the American dream. They came to the United States, became successful, became devoted, became pillars of their community. Alan worked for Ford Motor Company. His dad, Michael Angel Vigil, raised him in South Atlanta. Alan worked for the Ford Motor Company, and Ford Motor Company was opening a new dealership that didn't have anybody to run it down on Tara Boulevard. Gene Evans and a gentleman from Macon had it together, and Alan went down there to run that business. And he became the Ford dealer, and the rest is history. And the impact that he's had on the quality of life of his community and individuals in his community. And the red light just came on. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, for giving Alan and Bonnie Vigil, Alan and Bonnie Vigil, a very warm Senate welcome. Thank y'all.
Are there any motions to withdraw and commit? The chair sees none. You have a consent calendar of privileged resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? The chair sees none. Is there objection to the adoption of the resolutions on the consent calendar? The chair hears none, and the resolutions on the consent calendar are adopted. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent that House Bill 105 be engrossed.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of House Bill 105?
House Bill number 105 by Representative Watson of the 172nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to the imposition, rate, computation, and exemptions from state income tax, so to exempt from state income tax certain income received by taxpayers as payments from a disaster relief or assistance program administered by the United States Department of Agriculture and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Majority Leader has asked for unanimous consent that House Bill 105 be engrossed. Is there objection? There's objection. Would the Majority Leader like to speak to his motion? Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. For decades now, we have made a practice in the Senate of engrossing both finance bills and ethics bills. This bill is out of finance. It's a complicated bill that takes care of the farmers that almost lost everything after Hurricane Michael. They've got government support to get them back on their feet to kind of continue to promote the #1 industry within the state of Georgia. And what you don't want to do is punish them further by not passing this bill or by complicating it to the point that it is not passable. That is why I've asked for your engrossment. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Would the senator from the 42nd like to speak to her objection? She waves. All those in favor of the motion to engross will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to engross, the yeas are 32, the nays are 19, and the motion has prevailed to engross. We're now moving on to the rules calendar. We are now moving on to the rules calendar. I'd like to ask that this chamber come back to order. We are now moving on to the rules calendar. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 323?
Senate Bill number 323 by Senator Kirkpatrick the 32nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 43 of the OCGA relating to professions and businesses so as to provide patient protection measures for patients undergoing sedation in certain settings, provide for patients under conscious sedation in dental settings and for dental procedures, provide for patients under varying levels of sedation in physician offices and medi-spas, provide for definitions and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 26, 2020, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Watson, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 323. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 43 of the OCGA relating to professions and businesses so as to provide patient protection measures for patients undergoing sedation in certain settings, provide for patients under conscious sedation in dental settings and for dental procedures, provide for patients under varying levels of sedation in physician offices and medi-spas and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd to speak to Senate Bill 323.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, this patient safety bill relates to sedation in the outpatient setting outside of a hospital or ambulatory surgery center. This conversation started after 2 deaths in my county in young adults, which occurred in a medi-spa. The facility did not have appropriate personnel or equipment, and they were doing procedures like liposuction. The details of the cases are horrific, and in addition, there was a case in my county last fall of 3 unlicensed people doing cosmetic surgery in a medi-spa with more than 30 patients testifying at the trial. On investigating how this happened, I learned that medi-spas are not clearly defined because they're licensed under a business license and not as a healthcare facility. In other words, they're licensed the same as a nail salon, tanning booth, or sauna. Therefore, they're not regulated by DCH's Healthcare Facilities Regulation Unit. Procedures like Botox or minor procedures under local anesthesia are done in medi-spas, but sometimes larger procedures are done. Doctors and dentists do perform sedation in the office setting at times, and there are guidelines in place by the Composite State Medical Board and the Board of Dentistry that outline the proper procedures. However, because this is not addressed in the code, bad outcomes often do not become known to the licensing boards until after the fact, which can be too late for patients. Certainly, most doctors and dentists are practicing safely in this situation. The licensing boards have done a good job in laying out expectations. However, they don't have the force of law behind them currently. After months of discussion with the medical and dental boards and the Secretary of State's office, the approach of this bill is to simply state that if you're doing sedation, anything other than local anesthesia, outside of a hospital or ASC, you have to follow the rules of the licensing boards, which include appropriate personnel, equipment, and monitoring. Both boards support this bill, the medical board and the dental board, and this does not change anyone's current scope of practice. This bill should protect patient safety without adding a regulatory burden to the practitioners who are taking care of Georgia's patients. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak to Senate Bill 323? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. I do like the script. It seems to flow pretty well. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 372.
Senate Bill number 372 by Senator Tillery of the 19th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend various titles of the OCGA so as to modernize, clarify, and update provisions relating to public health. To amend Article 1 of Chapter 10 of Title 17 of the OCGA relating to procedure for sentencing and imposition of punishment so as to revise the provision regarding the requirement of defendants to submit to HIV tests for AIDS transmitting crimes. To amend Article 2 of Chapter 3 of Title 19 of the OCGA relating to license and ceremony for marriage generally. To amend Title 31 of the OCGA relating to health, so to revise provisions regarding the Office of Women's Health and for other purposes. Mr. President, February 26, 2020, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Watson, Chair. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 372. A bill to be titled an act to amend various titles of the OCGA so as to modernize, clarify, and update provisions relating to public health, to eliminate certain councils and committees, to amend Code Section 161371 of the OCGA relating to dangerous drugs, to revise a provision relating to naloxone, to amend Article 1 of Chapter 10 of Title 17 of the OCGA, relating to procedure for sentencing and imposition of punishment, so as revise a provision regarding requirement of defendants to submit to HIV tests for AIDS transmitting crimes, to amend Article 2 of Chapter 3 and 19 of the OCGA relating to a license and ceremony for marriage generally. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th to speak to Senate Bill 372.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I bring to you Senate Bill 372 as passed out of the Health and Human Services Committee. It is a department bill that cleans up some language and walks through 8 sections of changes. I'll run you through those very quickly. The first one, Section 1, allows naloxone, a drug we have talked about a lot in this chamber that's used to reverse some of the effects of opioids, to be purchased from a distributor, which will allow us to reduce the cost of that for local county governments by approximately 40%. Section 2, there was a provision of our old code that required when someone was convicted of a crime that could transfer HIV, for the order to be sent to the Department of Public Health. The Department of Public Health does not need to have that order. They are already required, if they are convicted of such a thing, to have an HIV test. The Department of Public Health does not need to be involved in that any longer. Section 3, last year we passed a bill about child marriage, required that a poster be made to talk about if someone was underage and the things that they had to go through for marriage and could not be forced into marriage. It required the Department of Public Health to promulgate rules. Once the poster's made, there's no need to promulgate rules. So that's a cleanup there. Section 4 is actually a part that I do want to highlight for you, because our chamber has done many things concerning maternal health. What Section 4 does is, while the Department of Public Health and the Office of Women's Health under the Department of Public Health was never authorized before to deal with reproductive issues, this bill for the first time will allow the Office of Women's Health under the Department of Public Health to now focus on the reproductive issues as well. Section 5 is a recognition that people are living longer. For vital records, we need to move those ages up so that folks can be able to get their vital records from local county probate courts. Section 6 strikes a advisory committee that was formed under the Nixon administration and never appointed. Section 7 strikes another provision that requires court orders concerning transfers between nursing homes for folks who are incapacitated. Required that order to be given to the Department of Public Health. It really should go to the Department of Community Health. And then Section 7 takes and changes every section in code where we mention venereal disease and replaces it with the new nomenclature and vernacular, which is sexually transmitted disease. That's Section 8. Mr. President, those are all the changes. If there are any questions, I'll take those now.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I urge favorable passage of the bill.
Does any other senator wish to speak to Senate Bill 372? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of House Bill 792.
House Bill Number 792 by Representative Ralston of the 7th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend an act making and providing appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020, known as the General Appropriations Act, Act Number 319, approved May 10th, 2019, so as to make, provide, and change certain appropriations for the operations of the state government and its departments, boards, bureaus, commissions, institutions, and other agencies, and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 2nd, 2020, the Committee of the Senate on Appropriations recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Hill, the fourth chair. Mr. President, the Senate Appropriations Committee substitute to House Bill 792, a bill entitled An Act to Amend an Act making and providing appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020, known as the General Appropriations Act, Act Number 319, approved May 10th, 2019, so as to make, provide, and change certain appropriations for the operation of the state government and its departments, boards, bureaus, commissions, institutions, and other agencies. That completes order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes our very well prepared and well studied Chairman of Appropriations, the Senator from the 4th, to present House Bill 792.
Not so sure about that. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. First of all, let me start and point out the on your desk is the list of ads and so forth from the Senate version of 792. It's set up in such a way that it's easy for you to read. The first part of it entails Senate ads. So that first part of this handout has Senate ads, and the next part goes to restorations and agrees with the House, and other highlights are listed. But the ones that are kind of important are the ones that we've added, and that's all in the first part of that handout. That's a good way to follow. You can also follow my remarks by looking at that as well, by looking at the area of the budget that it's from and referring. Of course, on your desk is also the Senate version of the House Bill 792, which is the amended FY20 amended budget. On the behalf of the leadership of the Senate, I bring you the FY 2020 amended budget. First, I, of course, want to thank the subcommittee chairs and the members who met on this budget, in addition to all their other responsibilities. And you know, we did not take any days off to work on this budget as well. No standing committees were affected by our schedule, and that's greatly in thanks to clever scheduling and great work by Jasmine Bucard in our office and the cooperation of the subcommittee chairs. I don't want to lose sight of that, because not that it matters, but the House took a week and a half off. We didn't take a single day off to pass this budget to get it before you today. I salute the Lieutenant Governor's office and the President Pro Tem and the Majority Leader for their diligence in meeting in our Green Growth Committee to meet and pass this budget in the middle of a busy week. So we produced that with all their other responsibilities as well. None of this would be possible without the hard work of the Senate Budget and Evaluation Office staff that's headed by Melody Debussy. They put in long hours to produce the information that we needed to make hard decisions. I'd like to take a minute and ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to give a hand to the Budget Office that produced this document. We also appreciate the continued cooperation of the House Appropriations Chairman Terry England, Martha Wigdon, and the House Budget Office. There's a lot of communication that flows back and forth between all of these. And certainly Kelly Farr, the Director of the Office of Planning and Budget for the Governor, and the Governor Kemp's staff as well. All of these have been very cooperative in the exchange of information. This budget is a departure from recent budget history for a couple of reasons. First, the governor reduced the revenue estimate in this year that we're in now, this 2020 budget, so that this budget is built on only a 0.05% increase in spending, and is balanced only with the addition of $255.7 million from the reserve for K-12 education growth in the mid-year adjustment. This is normal. We do this every year, and no rainy day funds, no reserve funds have been used in this budget. This is possible because of the 4% budget reductions that the governor required of agencies earlier this year, and the early implementation of most of those cuts back in October. The vacant positions eliminated by the governor were reduced with strategic injuries with about the same savings involved. So as we saw the need and all through the budget, we restored positions that we thought were vital to services for our state. In the amended budget, lottery proceeds are reduced 1.4% to $1.231 billion. So there is a slight reduction there. Motor fuel taxes are adjusted downward to fit the revenues that are coming in, down 0.7% to $1.911 billion, with total transportation revenues at $2.1 billion. You know, when you all, members of the Senate, see Senate changes in the budget, a lot of times you all ask us when our numbers differ from the House and the governor, say, well, where'd you find the money? So I'm going to take a minute and tell you where we found the money and where these restorations, how they were possible. Each budget is first produced by the governor, who sets the revenue estimate and then spends every penny of that revenue estimate. So when the budget comes to us, it's all spent. So when we make any changes, we have to, I wouldn't say create funding, but we either have to take it from somewhere or we need to find efficiencies. So every year, our budget staffs, both here and in the House, comb through agencies' budgets looking for efficiencies. Now, these may take the form of later starting dates for employees when new positions go to work, or spending trends that indicate that they will have a surplus at the end of the year. And we look at previous year's surpluses as well. And we extended the 4% cuts to the Senate, which generated some funds, and also took a 2% cut in the judiciary branch of all agencies, and in the spirit of all agencies being participants. We also took reductions in the prosecuting attorney's area of the budget as well. Another place we found some funds was in an era in the education budget under the QBE Local 5 Share category. We saved some $3.2 million there. We also took some reductions by instructing the Student Finance Commission to use existing reserves of various state-funded scholarship programs, not lottery-funded, but state-funded scholarship programs. And you'll see in the budget, if you look up one of those cuts, you'll see the cut in reserves and the remaining balance in each scholarship category. For example, in the Georgia Military College item 324.1 scholarship, we took a cut of $441,987. We left a reserve, a balance of $339,064 in scholarship funds. They only spend $1.2 million a year, so that's a third of a year's expenditure. Of course, they'll have a full $1.2 million coming to them in the big budget. So that reserve can stand a cut, and we took that cut and left those instructions. No lottery or Hope Scholarship funding was touched in this budget in generating revenue. We also found some efficiencies in recalculating the Medicare Part B hold harmless provision in the Department of Community Health that produced $5.3 million in state and federal funds. Now, this is a budget with few real ads, frankly, but what we tried to do was look at services reductions and where we could restore services that directly affect children, the elderly, the disabled, and essential public safety and judicial responsibilities. These included things like food safety, accountability courts, and public defenders, just for a couple examples. So with that, here are a few of the changes. First, we agreed with the good work the House did on many restorations. They were thoughtful. We believe they were thoughtful, and our subcommittees found little disagreement with many of the restorations of the House. One of the few adds involved startup costs to the business court, which will occupy space in the Nathan Deal Judicial Services building. The Senate added $269,000 for that court for a total of $1.267 million that is added for the funding of the business court that will be taking effect shortly. The Department of Administrative Services and the status of workers' comp claims will be a subject for conference this year, but we had some funding left over in one area, so we added $340,000 to create a difference so that subject of those reserves and what's going to happen with our claims that the state has. It's an issue that some of you are interested in. And issue that involves more than just the Senate and more than just the House. It involves the governor and all of state government taking a look at that. So we put a difference in there to bring that subject up at conference. In item 100.1, we restored $500,000 for loan repayment awards for rural advanced practice nurses, dentists, physician's assistants, and physicians. In item 124.3, we restored the last quarter, $125,000 for the Child Care and Parent Services, or CAPS program, which is in addition to the Senate made last year for underserved and rural underprivileged families in the state. That was an important program to some of you. We fully restored the cuts of $282,000 to RESAs, our regional education network that services local school systems around the state. There are two restorations of cuts for foster children services totaling $258,000 in items 184.4 and 184.7. These items assist with marketing and outreach for foster parent recruitment and restores 3 foster care support services personnel. In an era where we're constantly trying to generate and seek more foster parents, we think it's a good thing to continue spending those funds. In public health, we restored $136,000 for the Maternal and Child Health Services Block Grant Program on item 248.3 and .4, as well as restoring $197,000 for the treatment and screening of maternal depression in rural and underserved areas. So those are 2 areas that we have addressed the issue of maternal mortality. The Senate fully restored the proposed $6.3 million reduction to county boards of health in item 253.2. The Senate did differ with the House and restored the $2.1 million reduction to the Department of Public Safety in light of the current trooper school. The Senate agreed with the House and funded $200,000 for the Department of Agriculture to proceed with the licensing of the growing of hemp. So that process, I understand from Commissioner Black that some licenses may be issued as early as this week. That process moves forward. In the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, the Senate restored several cuts in items 57.2, 62.2, and others, totaling about $3.5 million. Mental health services to our citizens is truly important, and we felt like those restorations were very important. In community affairs, we restored cuts to the Georgia Advocacy Office. We've had letters from many of you on that, and the statewide Independent Living Council on lines 72.3 and 78.1. We agree with the House on item 89.2 and restored $463,000 to the Rural Health Systems Innovation Center. The Senate agreed with the House and restored the cut to Mercer and Morehouse medical school operating grants in items 98.1 and 99.1. We had letters from you all on that as well. In education, this budget fully funds the QBE midterm enrollment number, about $105 million, I believe. In item 198.1, we agreed with the House and held county allocations for Family Connection, the Family Connection program that affects every county in the state. We held that allocation at $50,000. There was a cut proposed. The Senate agreed with the governor and the House and funded the GBI with $819,000 for agents and analysts for the GBI Gang Task Force, and adds $420,000 for development of a gang database on items 212.4 and 212.5. We agreed with the House on item 213.6 to restore cuts to local accountability courts. Another important item is 241.4, where we agreed with the House and restored $1.1 million for frozen positions in the public defenders. Our court system cannot operate without our public defenders as a key player in that process. Another item we received input from senators on was the cut to public libraries. The Senate agreed with the House and restored $1.2 million for materials grants in item 283.5. Your counties will be glad to know that the Senate agreed with the governor and the House and funds $25 million for the annual true-up of the Forest Land Protection Grants, which replaces ad valorem taxes lost under a program. On item 341.1, we appropriated $1.5 million for the Middle Georgia Regional Airport to support an economic development initiative. And as late as yesterday, I checked with DOT, and that project is shovel-ready, and this funding will go a long way to help the folks in Middle Georgia for some very specific economic development projects that depend on this. And the Senate matched the House with $75,000, and we heard from many of you on this. We matched the House with $75,000 for the state to host the National Black Caucus of state legislators in Georgia, I assume this coming year. So to circle back and kind of summarize here, here are some of the main Senate additions to the FY 2020 budget. $269,000 added for the startup costs for the statewide business court. $340,000 added to workers' comp claims. $500,000 restoration for assistive technology assessments and research in developmental disabilities. In developmental disabilities, behavioral health, substance abuse, restored a $130,000 cut for curriculum development. $92,000 for the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce and graduate medical education restoration for the Memorial Health Accelerated Track for producing physicians. In the Department of Early Care and Learning, pre-kindergarten, $125,000 for 1 quarter restoration for child care and parent services, the CAPS program for low-income families. Senators from the 42nd will be glad to hear that. $125,000 to reduce the reduction to foster parent recruitment, marketing, and outreach. $282,000 to cut restoration for RESAs. $197,000 restoration for screening, referring, and treating maternal depression in rural and underserved areas. $136,000 added back for contracts and additional replacement of state funds for maternal and child health services block grants for medical services. $15,000 to establish a working group to make recommendations for addition of the Krabbe disease as approved by the Georgia Newborn Screening Advisory Committee. $6.3 million, fully restoring the reductions to the county boards of health. We added $1 million in super speeder funds to the Georgia Trauma Care Network for 2 facilities in rural Georgia to be upgraded in trauma care. We restored $2.1 million for the completion of a trooper school. Ladies and gentlemen, in a difficult year, we have done our best to carry on vital services and yet meet our fiscal responsibilities. Governor Kemp has done his best, the House has done its best, and I believe the Senate has also done its best to meet the needs of our citizens as best we can given the revenue situation in the state. I submit and recommend the 2020 amended budget to you and stand ready to answer your questions. Mr. President, that completes my remarks.
Does any senator have a question? The chair sees none. Thank you so much for that great
I urge
presentation.
your adoption of House Bill 792.
Chair recognizes the minority leader to speak to the bill.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I rise first of all to thank the senator from the 4th. He's an argument against term limits. His 30 years of experience helps bring a perspective and understanding to the budget that few of us have, and it helps strengthen the Senate position in informing us of the direction we need to try to address on these issues. I also want to stand with him in complimenting Melody DeBussy and the staff of the Budget Office, who, regardless of party, regardless of anything else, will always try their best to respond to our questions and concerns in a fair and fast manner. You know, each year we come before the citizens of Georgia and try to address their concerns with the state budget. And we have to remember that these are compounding effects, that every year something we do builds or subtracts from the year before. So we can't take any one moment of time all by itself. You know, when we look at the governor's budget, and we look at the House budget, and we look at the Senate budget, we know that we have tried, and the members of the Appropriation Committee and the chairman have tried to address some of the most pressing needs on mental health and other issues that we saw cut from the governor's budget. But we also know that in many ways, Georgia is being challenged and not meeting our needs. You know, when we look at our state, we know that the state has grown by just under 10% the last decade. You have 1 million new Georgians or thereabouts, and yet we see the state not necessarily serving them as well as we should in some areas of public safety, some areas of environmental protection, and others. You know, the state has grown, but our state employees have shrunk. I know that many of you applaud that because where possible, where state employees are not needed or inefficient, we should cut, and we should study those areas. But now, after the last income tax cut, we are finding that we're making cuts without necessarily the evaluation and assessment needed to make sound decisions. The chairman said we are restoring some areas that are most needed, most extreme. But we know the areas that the governor recommended and that we have to agree to because of lack of money, areas in the Department of Human Services, prisons, and other areas, there are more cuts of state employees, millions of dollars or more cuts in positions. You know, some of those positions are vacant now, but it's not that they're not needed. We have 13,000 less employees than we did a decade ago in the state. And again, in some cases that might be appropriate. But I know from looking at state agencies that in some areas, the wait time to get services, the challenge of DFAC workers, to challenge some areas of our Environmental Protection Division, those challenges are steep. And we have to be concerned whether the citizens are getting all the services they need. As we go forward into the process of developing our big budget for next year, we're going to have a lot of challenges. And I hope to work with each of you to address those needs. We know that we want Georgia to be #1 in education, but we're not going to get there if we're near 40th in expenditures for our students. We know that we want Georgians' higher education to be one of the finest in the country, but we don't get there by dropping our state appropriations and general fund obligations to higher education and doing as the senator from the 40th brought to us earlier, in a point of personal privilege, having tuition increase 6-fold for people going to our public colleges. So we have areas to address and needs to be met. I applaud the chairman for listening to all of our concerns and doing the best that he can. But our constituents sent us here to make tough decisions. And sometimes those decisions cause us to reflect on what we should invest in. If we don't have safe roads, if we don't have a strong public education system, and we don't have the protection of our drinking water, our air, then we're letting people down. So as we move on to the big budget, we'll be talking about those issues and others and trying to seek support across the aisle to make sure Georgians are protected, healthy, and have a bright future. I'd be remiss to say that in the big budget coming up, I was most disappointed not to see the governor's recommendation, even a small recommendation for expansion of Medicaid, which he promised each and every one of us last session would be one of his priorities, to expand it to 100% of poverty. As much as I talked about going to 138% and other members wanted to go to what was called full Medicaid expansion, we did not see that recommendation yet for the big budget. But on the small budget, we appreciate the work that was done. We have concerns about some of the rollbacks that are in there for positions, and we will be talking to you further to see what can be addressed in the big budget. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senators wish to speak for or against House Bill 792? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. For what purpose does the senator from the 4th rise?
Mr. President, I move the Senate immediately transmit House Bill 792 to the House.
Senator from the 4th has moved that the Senate immediately transmit House Bill 792 to the House. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and it is immediately transmitted to the House. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of Senate Bill 395?
Senate Bill number 395 by Senator Watson of the 1st and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 4 of Chapter 7 of Title 31 of the OCGA relating to county and municipal hospital authorities, so to revise the standard of indigency relating to portioning of proceeds from the sale or lease of a hospital by a hospital authority, to provide for additional methods for the investment of funds by hospital authorities which hold an irrevocable trust within the corpus exceeds certain amounts and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 26, 2020, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Watson. Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 1st to speak to Senate Bill 395.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor here to present Senate Bill 395. It's really a straightforward bill, so I will just take you through it sort of line by line. Lines 36 really just increases the indigent care from 125% up to 138% of federal poverty level. That expands the usage of the indigent funds. And then the other two sections relating to the amount that the hospital authority has. If it's $75 million, you can invest up to 30% in the Securities and Exchange Commission Investment Act, commingled funds, and investment funds, basically money market funds. And if you have $100 million in your hospital authority, then you can use it like the Public Retirement Systems Investment Authority law, which is basically the teacher's retirement system. Let me just give you a little background here, and maybe I should have started with that first, but this is a bill that originated with the sale of a hospital in Savannah, so that the hospital authority has this money that is to be used for indigent care only. The principal is not to be used, but the interest will be used. It is now invested at a rate, I think the bond rate's maybe 1.1%. This will allow a higher return on investment and allow more care for the indigents in Chatham County, which is where the hospital authority is. It's pretty straightforward. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll ask for your favorable consideration.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Gill.
Yes.
First of all, I want to commend you. Your tie looks very nice today.
Thank you. It's the St. Patrick's Day, and I like your tie too.
Thank you. Second, is it not true that this bill would be very helpful for the folks in rural Georgia who have long need this help after the Hurricane Michael.
For Hurricane Michael. If the senator knows what he speaks, I'm sure he's absolutely correct. Thank you.
You have no more questions. Oh, Chair recognizes the senator from the 17th for a question. Sorry about that.
Does Senator yield?
Yes, to my distinguished colleague.
Senator, why do you have a green tie on today?
Well, it is St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, and the Grand Marshal and the Adjutant General relating to the parade, which is a significant event in Savannah, and I think for the whole state of Georgia personally, they're here today.
Do you further yield?
Yes.
And what would happen if for some reason you forgot to pack a green tie this week for such an important day like today?
You know, this is a very collegial group, and we would ask for others to lend their helping hand. Thank you so much for those questions.
Believe it or not, Senator, you have no more questions.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to support Senate Bill 395. Although many of you know this is a general bill, but under the present language as it states now, it only has local implications. There are not that many hospital authorities in our great state, but this bill as it reads applies only to Savannah, Georgia, and its hospital Memorial Health. So I urge everyone to support it. And if there are no questions, Mr. President, I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 9th for a question, if you yield.
Will Senator yield?
I will yield for a friendly question, my friend.
Senator, do you think that it's possible that the senator from the 1st may have borrowed his tie from the senator from the 17th?
I think that's highly likely, looking at the color of his shirt. And
do you further yield?
I do, sir.
Does the senator from the 1st often come to you for fashion advice?
No, sir, he does not, but I'm available.
All right.
If there be no other questions, Mr. President, I yield the will. Yeah,
The senator has yielded the well. Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 395? The chair sees none. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. You nervous? Oh man, I heard a lot about this bill. Oh man, this board's already lit up. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. For the record, I like your green tie. I think it looks great with your blue shirt. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 407?
Senate Bill number 407 by Senator Harper II and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 12 of the OCGA relating to forest resources and other plant life, so as to regulate the harvest and sale of palmetto berries, to provide for definitions, to provide for legislative findings, to provide for certificates of harvest, and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 25th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Harper, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Natural Resources offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 409, a bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 12 of the OCGA relating to forest resources and other plant life, so as to regulate the harvest and sale of palmetto berries, provide for definitions, provide for legislative findings, provide for certificates of harvest, provide for records of harvest activities and purchase transactions, provide for prohibited acts, to provide for stop sale, to stop use and removal orders, to provide for seizure of berries, to provide for the home or personal use of berries, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Harper of the 7th, Heath of the 31st, and Karen Shack of the 48th offer the following amendment number 1 to amend the committee substitute to Senate Bill 407 by striking lines 104 and 105 and by inserting in lieu thereof the following. This article shall not be construed so as to affect any landowner that harvests or handles solid palmetto berries for home or personal use. Back, please, order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 7th to speak to Senate Bill 407 and his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, the Senate, Senate Bill 407 that you have before you is an attempt to address an issue that we have, especially in South Georgia, where most of these saw palmettos and the saw palmetto berries are found. Senate Bill 407 tracks very closely to what was passed by this General Assembly a couple of years back in dealing with the pine straw code. There is a provision in the code already that deals with the theft of pine straw. So we track that similar to that provision in creating Senate Bill 407 to address the theft of palmetto berries. Basically, Senate Bill 407 establishes a certificate of harvest that a person must have to be able to harvest those berries and sell those berries, and it institutes penalties for individuals that do it outside of the provisions of this particular code. Current law, unfortunately, the provisions of current law don't provide adequate enough ability for law enforcement and landowners to be able to protect their property, their land, and really the berries that they have on their property and their land, and that's what this is intending to do. Florida has passed a law, and the thieves know that Georgia doesn't have a law, and they come to Georgia more intently because of that, and they steal our berries down in South Georgia, and it's just become a significant issue, especially in the forestry community. I would appreciate your support on the underlying bill. And I will speak to the amendment really quick. There is an amendment, and this may be a first, but I will have to commend the senator from the 48th and the 31st. I'm proud to sign on an amendment with both of them, so that may have you worried that all three of us are in agreement today. But it basically addresses the concern in the bill that we found in committee. We tried to fix it in committee. But after that, I found some language that better got at what we were trying to do, and that's to make sure that the landowner could harvest those berries themselves and take them home for personal use if they so desired. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's what Senate Bill 407 does. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take those. If there are not, I will happily yield the will.
You have questions.
I had a feeling.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd for a question.
Senator yield.
I will yield to the distinguished rules chairman.
Mr. Chairman, isn't it true you are a farmer?
I am a farmer.
Isn't it true that on farms you grow things sometimes?
The senator is accurate in that.
Okay. Is it true that you grow this plant on your farm?
So these plants are actually naturally
That was a yes or a no
for the most
kind of
part. And yes, they are very prevalent throughout South Georgia.
Okay, Senator, further you.
I'll yield.
Can you tell me what this plant does?
Well, this the particular plant that we're talking about, the saw palmetto, produces the palmetto berry.
Shazam.
Yeah.
Senator Yield.
I'll further yield to my good friend.
This is my last question. What does a palmetto berry do? What kind of
advantages
effect does it have for us?
Well, it's I'm glad you asked, Mr. Chairman, because I have got something for you that I'll make sure you get after I walk out of the well. A particular pill that is made from the saw palmetto berry, and one of the things that it does is it does prevent hair loss, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not saying that you have that issue, or anybody else in here has that issue, but you might want to share this with some of your friends in the chamber. Among other things, that the salt and palmetto berries help, especially when it comes to men's health, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sure you will.
Do you
That's right.
continue?
I'll yield for another question, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President.
The chair recognizes the senator from the 31st for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. To Senator Yield.
I'll yield.
Senator, you have spoken of the growth promoting properties of this berry, and I see that you keep your bottle with you, but how long have you been taking those pills?
Well, obviously not long enough to my good friend from the 31st. I'm still fairly short.
Do you continue to yield?
I will yield for one more question.
The chair
Mr.
recognizes the
Chairman.
minority leader for a question.
The senator yield?
I'll yield to the minority leader. Yes, sir.
On page, line 65, it says a person who participates in the procurement. Why would it say participate as opposed to procures? Could you be, you know, a guest of your friend who's getting them and you're participating, and you'd have to have this record provided? Or if you're walking with somebody while they are procuring and are you a participant now? Why is that the language there instead of someone who procures?
I think the intent of that is to make sure that it's that we're making sure that we're covering all those that are involved in this particular issue. I will tell you, I know of numerous instances where law enforcement has found and arrested and detained individuals. So it's more than one person that normally is involved in this. So I believe that language is just to make sure that we're encompassing the language enough to where we make sure that we get all those that are participating in the illegal harvesting of the berries. That's the intent.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I'll yield.
Brace for impact.
What exactly is on that bottle? What are these for?
Saw palmetto, traditionally used for prostate and urinary health.
Does the senator further yield?
I'll further yield.
Senator, would that explain why this jelly is on our desk?
No comment. I will yield the will.
You have
on that
no
one,
more
Mr.
questions.
Chairman, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 407? The chair sees none. The question is on the, let's take up amendment number 1. Let's take up amendment number 1. Is there objection to adopting amendment number 1? The chair hears none, and amendment number 1 is adopted. The question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Chair hears none. The committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 3. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 429?
Senate Bill number 429 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend the official code of Georgia annotated so as to revise, modernize, correct errors or omissions in, and reenact the statutory portion of said code as amended in furtherance of the work of the Code Revision Commission. Repeal portions of said code or act and amendment thereof which have become obsolete have been declared to be unconstitutional and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 27, 2020, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute, respectfully submitted by Senator Stone of the 23rd Chair. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 429, a bill to be titled an act to amend the official code of Georgia annotated so as to revise, modernize, correct errors or omissions in, and reenact the statutory portion of said code as amended in furtherance of the work of the Code Revision Commission. To repeal portions of said code or acts and amendment thereof which have become obsolete, have been declared to be unconstitutional, and for other purposes. That please order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 3rd to speak to Senate Bill 429.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Although this bill is a little more mundane than the last one, it certainly is important. It's our annual code revision bill, which corrects clerical errors in our code, repeals provisions that have been declared unconstitutional by the courts, and actually reenacts the code, which we must do every year. I'll be glad to yield for any questions, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the pro tem for a question.
Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, is it, do people drive from far away to hear you present a bill in the chamber? Anybody?
There's some very important people to me that have driven a long, long way.
Driven a long, long way to hear you present this bill.
If I could recognize you, could I recognize them?
Well,
I like to recognize my mother and my
Senator,
father.
I'm asking the questions.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it'd be highly appropriate that you recognize the lady and gentleman in the gallery, and I'm really somewhat dismayed that you haven't already done that.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. We recognized them early. It's an honor to recognize them again.
One more time.
Yes, sir. One more time.
One more time, because I want them to make sure they see you present this bill in the well.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to recognize my mother and father, Bill and Dorothy Jean Ligon from Brunswick, Georgia. And
by the way, Mrs. Ligon is not with the realtors. She just happened to be wearing a blue dress.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Do you continue to yield?
I'll yield for one more.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does Senator yield?
Yes, sir.
For the benefit of this body and the rest of Georgia, would you tell us how long this bill, I see it was not amended in the Judiciary Committee. How long did the presentation take in the Judiciary Committee when you presented Senate this bill that's 23 pages long?
I don't have the exact length of time. It wasn't very long, but if you look through it and read it, you can see that it's correcting mainly typographical errors or grammatical errors in the code.
In various code sections.
That's right, various code sections.
You have no more questions.
Okay, no more questions? I yield the well. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 429? The chair sees none. The question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. gift that bottle?
I gave it to Lois. Lois has already opened it and already used it.
His pulse is up by 60 beats. Oh, the humor generated here. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of House Bill 105?
House Bill number 105 by Representative Watson of the 172nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to the imposition, rate, computation, and exemptions from state income tax so as to exempt state income tax certain income received by taxpayers as payments from a disaster relief or assistance program and administered by the United States Department of Agriculture in connection with Hurricane Michael and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 27, 2020, the Senate Committee on Finance recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Hufstetler, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance offers the following substitute to House Bill 105. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 48 of the OCGA relating to revenue and taxation so as to exempt from state income tax certain income received by taxpayers as payments from federal disaster relief or assistance grants program administered by the state or its instrumentalities or United States Department of Agriculture in connection with Hurricane Michael and for other purposes. That please order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 51st to speak to House Bill 105.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm here to present House Bill 105 to you. This bill has two sections. One section will be of a lot of concern to all of us and a lot of importance. Back during Hurricane Michael's devastation to southwest Georgia, we've waited several years now. It's been almost 2 years since relief has come from Washington, D.C. I'm glad to report that those funds have been released and are coming into our state to help relieve farmers in southwest Georgia. This bill will relieve those recipients of those grants and loans from the income tax that is due under normal income. So this would exempt the state income tax. I believe the federal income tax is already waived as well from the federal government. So I believe it's a no-brainer for us. We want to support our industry. Our ag industry continues to be the #1 industry in Georgia, and we want to support our farmers and wish them well as they recover for what's going to take some decades to fully recover from that damage. The second portion of the bill deals with rideshare, and rideshare means taxis, and it means Ubers and Lyfts and other shared ride businesses in our state. Currently, under the bill that we passed earlier this session, Marketplace Facilitator, on April 1st, all of these rideshare companies will be subject to the sales tax of the appropriate jurisdiction, whether that's 6, 7, 8, or even 9% in some areas. This bill is a compromise bill that we've worked on since last year that would eliminate the sales tax portion on ride shares, but instead replace it with a flat excise tax. So for an example, if you pick up an Uber ride this afternoon to go home in, you would have to pay 50 cents in lieu of the 7, 8, or 9% sales tax. So we believe this is a fair compromise. Most states have no tax whatsoever. There is a bill coming through the House that would eliminate this tax altogether. We believe that this revenue is important for transportation, so this bill would designate these funds to go back into the state's infrastructure, which is in dire need of improvement. So I'm happy to take any questions at this time, Mr. President, if there are any.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I will.
So this is currently under the Marketplace Facilitator?
Because of Marketplace Facilitator, there will be a provision, April 1st, the sales tax would apply to rideshare. Some argue that they were already obligated to pay it. However, I'm understanding that there is a disagreement on that from years past, and that continues to be a disagreement. This clarifies all that. It repeals all the sales tax and would, instead of a sales tax, put an excise tax in place.
What would be the difference between the estimated revenue from the sales tax and the revenue from?
There's a fiscal note in your book, and I'll remind you that as of today, I don't believe there's been any collections of the sales tax from the rideshare companies. However, there were taxi cabs paying into the state coffers, and that number is in your fiscal note, I believe, shows that approximately $1.5 to $2 million a year. So we're going to collect around $40 million a year from the rideshare companies with this new provision. So that $40 million will go to the general fund, and we would appropriate that to the transportation needs of the state to include transit.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
Yes, sir.
Can you walk me through the evolution of, forgetting ride shares for a second, the tax on taxis? Where were we before Marketplace Facilitator, and where are we taking it with this bill?
It's my understanding, the chairman of finance may correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm understanding that they were already paying the sales tax of the appropriate jurisdiction. So in Atlanta, they would be paying the highest sales tax in the nation, and that would also apply to the Ubers and Lyfts if we don't pass this bill today.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. Appreciate your support.
Does any other senator wish to speak to House Bill 105? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Lights dim today. What happened? The lights didn't dim today. Did you choke out some electrician or something? On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. For what purpose does the senator from the 52nd rise?
President, pursuant to Senate Rule 7-1.10B, I give notice that at the appropriate time I intend to move that the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Resolution 164.
Will the secretary read the caption of House Resolution 164?
House Resolution number 164 by Representative Powell of the 171st and others. A resolution proposing amendment to the Constitution so as to authorize the General Assembly to provide by general law for the dedication of revenues derived from fees or taxes to the public purpose for which such fees or taxes were imposed. Provide for procedures, conditions, and limitations, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 52nd has served notice of his intent to move the Senate to agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Resolution 164. Senator, your motion will be in order tomorrow. A copy of the bill and the amendment are all on your desks. For what purpose does the senator from the 12th rise?
Mr. President, I move that the Senate adhere to its amendment to the House substitute to SB 68 and that a conference committee be appointed. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Bill number 68 by Senator Sims of the 12th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 20 of the OCGA relating to education so as to strengthen provisions relating to the financial management of local school systems, provide for training for local Board of Education members and local school superintendents on financial management and for other purposes. That will be so ordered, Mr. President.
The senator from the 12th has moved that the Senate adhere to its amendment to the House substitute to Senate Bill 68 and that a conference committee be appointed. Is there objection? The chair hears none and appoints the senators from the 12th, the 9th, and the 31st. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Thursday, 5 March 2020.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the announcements?
Rules will meet upon adjournment at 4:50 CAP. Public Safety will meet in Mez 1 at 2 p.m. Education and Youth will meet in 307 CLOB at 3 p.m. Economic Development and Tourism has been canceled. Health and Human Services will meet in 450 CAP at 4 p.m. Judiciary will meet in 307 CLOB at 5 p.m. And Retirement will meet in Mez 1 at 5 p.m. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Do any senators have additional announcements? The chair sees none. The majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until Thursday, March 5th, 2020 at 10 a.m. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it, and the Senate stands adjourned.